All right, stop, automate, and listen. That's some vanilla ice for you. Just to kick things off here on our Automation Industry Roundtable from MarketScale, I'm Tyler Kern. Thanks so much for joining me here today. Thank you for putting up with that joke. We have an exciting show lined up for you today. We want to make this as collaborative as possible, an interactive experience, and we want to make this a roundtable experience unlike anything that you've experienced up until this point. Obviously, everyone has been on numerous Zoom calls and all sorts of things. We want to make this fun. We want to make this interactive. So make sure you're leaving comments, asking questions there on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there on the page where you're joining us today for this roundtable. We want to make sure to answer your questions, and if you leave feedback, we want to take that into account. And so if you do leave a question there, we'll call a timeout. We'll answer the question here as quickly as we can. We don't want to leave you hanging while you ask some fantastic questions down there. So drop questions. It's going to be a great conversation today as we dive into optimizing your packaging and distribution operation. And today I'm joined by 5 fantastic panelists who are joining me here on this roundtable. First and foremost, we have Richard Boyd. He's the CEO of Tanjo, followed by Steve Reed, VP of Safety and Engineering at Casa Companies, Michael Sensky, Chairman and CEO at Pearson Packaging Systems, Ryan Wasman, Director of Sales and Marketing for Concept Systems, and Ricky Landini, Managing Director at Landini Associates. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me here on our Industry Roundtable.
Tyler.
Thanks for having us.
Well, fantastic. I am thrilled to have all of you here on the show today. And I want to start off with a really basic question. And Richard, we'll start off with you. And I want to get everyone's response here. Just a simple, a really maybe short answer as far as just why automate. So Richard, let me kick it to you first. Why automate, Richard?
Well, I think it's generally becoming known that the critical problem of the 21st century is, how to achieve the right balance between humans and machines to optimize outcomes. And, there was a time when it was only about human effort. We were thinking about robotic systems, that sort of thing, just for tasks that humans were performing on the factory lines, that sort of thing. But today we're thinking about things like even cognitive tasks. And the answer to that question, and what makes this conversation today so important, is that the answer is changing about every couple of weeks, every month. Where should you put that line? And any company who's not spending time trying to strike that right balance is going to have difficulty in the 21st century competing.
Steve, follow up from that. Why automate?
Well, I think that's Richard. That's one aspect. A different aspect is automation can easily do repetitive tasks that are unsafe for humans to do. Those mundane tasks, if you will. Automation can easily do that and take those people that were doing those tasks and put them into roles that further help the company. So another reason to automate would be to get more efficiency out of your overall process.
Ricky, let me hear from you next. Why automate, in your opinion?
Well, I think, as retail designers, we don't think you should automate for the sake of automation. But, everything we do is to enhance a customer experience. So, there's a great deal of automation that can enhance that. Some of it's behind the scenes. The customer doesn't actually see it. But, if a company is more efficient, if they're, maybe removing some of those rather mundane tasks, they're likely to be able to deliver a much better customer experience.
Michael, do you agree with Ricky's comments just about don't automate for the sake of automating, but understanding exactly where you want to improve and how you want to improve when it comes to automation?
Yeah, I think there's a myriad reasons why you can automate and why you should automate. But one of the things we look at is what's the customer experience going to be, and improving product quality, maintaining product consistency, things like that actually impact your end customer. Not just the efficiencies that are derived, not just increased throughput, but it's actually kind of how the customer ultimately experiences your product can be improved pretty dramatically through automation.
Ryan, wrap us up with your thoughts on why automate in the first place.
Oh, I have to say, everyone's had really good opinions on this. I think from an automation perspective, it's kind of like, why would you buy a dishwasher, right? You're taking a problem, something that maybe takes too long, that's manual labor, that you got more things to do, like spend time with your kids or do some other things that are more valuable. So if you're using your time for the more valuable tasks, automating the simple tasks, I think that's a big reason to automate. Finding the problems that are taking your time away from solving really complex problems, automating those problems.
So for a lot of people, they are hearing our conversation and hearing about automation, and they might be thinking, okay, how do I get an entire robotic system? And they're going to have questions around that. And so let's talk through some of the big questions that you get around automation. And let's start off by talking about the time frame and maybe set some expectations there. So Steve, let's go to you first. For somebody that wants an entire robotic system installed in a really quick time frame, what type of time frame should they be expecting? Let's answer some questions around that.
Well, the robot in and of itself is one thing, and obviously there's a period of time that it takes from the time you decide what it is you need with regards to that robot. Don't forget about the end effector, the part at the end of the arm of the robot that needs to do the work with your particular product. Maybe you're vacuuming up pancakes, maybe you're grabbing a 80-pound sack of cement. That end effector is the thing that's has to be potentially designed around that part that you have. And then the robot is kind of the robot is selected to match that end effector for the process that is happening. And some of those can be stock or standard. Some of them are custom designed. So really it depends on the different robot manufacturers, the different end effector manufacturers of what time frame that takes. Some of them may be off the shelf. The reality, like a palletizing machine, for example, may be off the shelf. Others may take some time to design. But that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is the automation of the conveyor system or the mechanical system that feeds product to the robot and then takes product away from the robot. Don't forget about those pieces. They are part of it. The reality is many times those can be integrated at the same time as the robot. So those time frames can really overlap in many cases. So those are the three big things: the end effector, the robot itself, and then the conveyor system, or the system carrying product to and from the robot.
So Richard, is this an experience that you've had where people all of a sudden get maybe the automation bug and they think, all right, this is something we need to do, and they want to go on a really accelerated time frame? How do you walk through that process of understanding exactly what type of automation they need in a particular facility and suggest the solution that's going to work best for them in the long run?
Yeah, this is a critical decision point for a lot of companies, especially if they haven't done automation before. We always encourage them to think about the change management issues that might come up that maybe you can't anticipate. We've learned that in education, where if you just take laptops and things and throw them into the classroom, you think you've solved a problem, but you've also created a slew of other problems that don't necessarily integrate with the workflow. So that's even more important in any sort of manufacturing environment. And again, I spent some time at Lockheed Martin where we were automating all sorts of things, all the way up through F-35s. And thinking through that change management element is important. So how is it going to fit into the workflow? How are humans and machines going to fluently work together? Where are the handoffs? Understanding that's important. So we always encourage our clients to think about, bite off something that's low-hanging fruit that maybe you can accomplish in 6 months, and then add the time to think through the human sort of HR elements of the workflow. What impact does this have on safety and the morale of workers and that sort of thing. So integrating those two things together is non-trivial. So extra thought and care has to be put into it. And so biting off something small to begin with and then seeing how that works before you expand is usually good guidance, in my opinion.
Ricky, do you have any follow-up thoughts on what Richard just said there?
Well, I mean, some of sort of like these engineering type of things were a bit above my pay grade. I mean, we're much more interested in what things look like, and as you know, as well as their efficiencies. So, probably not.
Michael, what about you? Just on your side, when it comes to determining solutions that's going to work best in a particular facility, what do you think about that process and how to walk through it? And what Richard said about starting small and not biting off more than you can chew there at the beginning.
Yeah, I think for us, at Pearson Packaging Systems, what we try to do is really engage with the customer and try to get what are they trying to accomplish. Really trying to understand: is it labor reduction? Is it improved product quality? Is it improved consistency of product? Things like that, and really trying to understand kind of what they're trying to accomplish kind of more holistically. And then once we do that, we can really kind of then hone in and start to work with them consultatively to determine kind of what opportunities exist for automation. I would say for customers that are automating for the first time, or potential customers that are automating for the first time, the vast majority of our customers have a lot of experience automating and are typically Fortune 500 food, beverage, and personal care companies. So we don't typically, get involved with just, the very first automation projects that the customer might have. But in those instances that we do, I think, identifying a clear scope of work, I think starting very small, like Richard said, and making sure that they can start automating kind of a piece at a time rather than trying to, eat the elephant in one bite. I think a very common mistake people make is they want to automate everything and they want to do it in a very, very short time period. And their infrastructure needs to be able to support that automation. Yes, they're eliminating, potentially, people from doing menial tasks, but they need to augment that with people who can then maintain and moderate that automation.
So Richard, I want to hop back around to you because I did want to give the audience maybe some examples of implementations that have gone wrong and why that occurred and what lessons maybe the audience can learn from those particular situations. And so these can be hypotheticals, for instance, but what can you share in terms of maybe an implementation that didn't go right and what caused it to not go right and what sorts of lessons can the audience learn from that particular situation?
Well, certainly many of the ones that my team has been involved in have been more with the cognitive elements of processes in companies. And the chief concerns there are that when you move to an automated system, it's kind of like, when we tried to create autonomous vehicles early on, so they can automate driving. Well, we thought, let's teach this autonomous system how to drive the way humans drive. And this is being very high level, but just follow me for a second. The mistake we made there is that autonomous systems that drive cars don't drive the way humans do. And first of all, we don't even understand how humans drive cars. How do humans make decisions as they drive down the road? It's this whole set of subtasks that we don't fully understand. So trying to translate that directly into some higher order tasks like driving a vehicle down the street, and I'm mapping this to what we did at Lockheed Martin around, drones and autonomous vehicles. That was a huge mistake that cost a couple of years of learning to understand that machines don't operate. They do things differently than humans do because they have a different set of sensors. They have optical sensors, they've got LiDAR, they've got GPS. So that creates both opportunities to get better automation and do things actually way, way better and faster and more efficiently and more effectively than humans. But it also creates some problems because we have this cognitive gap of not understanding that they're going to process differently than the way humans do. So that's a big mistake that, all you have to do is look at autonomous vehicles to see what we did there. But even, in other kinds of implementations, I've seen that same thing. Well, here's how humans do that, and humans need these many breaks, and they need, health insurance, and they need all this stuff. It's like, well, when you have automated systems, you don't need that anymore. So you have to really, there's a paradigm shift in your thinking about how you move to automation. But you can't just assume it's all upside. There are some downside things too, like making sure that you can Lockheed, we called it sustainment. How do I maintain those systems? I need new people, new humans with new capabilities there to maintain these other systems.
Steve, follow up with that. Do you have any examples of implementations that maybe haven't gone the way that they should have or that you expected? And why did that occur, and what lessons can we learn from it?
Absolutely. A couple of things. First of all, let me follow up to what Richard said. Just generational differences in the people that operate systems. Well, that's the way we've always done it. Or I'm not computer literate. Or the new people are computer literate, but unfortunately, they think that because of that, they can do things that they're not supposed to do. So it's important that all of the people, Ricky mentioned that with regards to whether or not to automate, she's interested in making sure that the product is good. Well, that needs to be part of the discussion on what and how far do we go with automation? How do we support it afterwards? What are the deliverables? That needs to be part of that schedule, part of the overall process. But also get those operators involved in that, because don't just assume that they're just going to take whatever we give them. They need to be a part of that process. And so my example of a failure is we had a very large food and beverage international company that I know about this process. I wasn't involved in it, thankfully, but they hired a consulting firm to come in and do their operator interface terminals. And they had a whole control room with a whole bank of monitors, but they drew the operator interface as an engineer would. They drew it from a process flow diagram perspective. Well, the operators didn't like it. They didn't understand how it worked. So the engineers for the company came in and they redid them all again. They all that engineering redone completely. Again, the operators didn't like it. They didn't understand it. It was better, but it still wasn't there. So the operators said, we'll do it. So they broke out the books and they learned how to do it, and they did it themselves. And they got what was 20 or 30 screens down to one screen because that's what was important to them. And my point is, it failed in that they spent lots and lots of engineering that they didn't have to spend if they would have got the operators involved from the beginning.
Ricky, you heard Steve reference one of the things you said there earlier. What do you take away from that? What types of lessons do you learn from that? And have you seen implementations of automation that have gone awry at times?
Well, yes. I mean, I think we all have, but, particularly in the early days. And I think both what Richard and Steve are saying are really pertinent. In the final kind of product that all the customer sees, they don't know about all this stuff behind the scenes that's so complicated. And I think one of the biggest things very often is the management change and trying to get people to shift their perceptions. At the moment, unfortunately, there's quite a lot of retailers who have an enormous amount of challenges. They had it before the pandemic with people shifting to ordering online. I'm talking about companies that have been around for a long time. And the pandemic, of course, has made that considerably worse. And a great many of them, we find, they do have difficulty in actually changing their perception. And it goes back very much, well, we've always done it like this. We've always done this. Now, that might have worked, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but it doesn't necessarily work now. So it's really important, I think, that organizations get their heads around this. They get their head around how they can increase their efficiency, their customer experience, and and make those shifts. And major fails, I don't know if I've seen any major fails really. Not little minor ones. But when technology or automation goes wrong, that's when the customer becomes really, really frustrated. That's a real pinch point for them.
That's an excellent point. And Michael, I wonder about you. Just how do you respond to Nikki's or to Ricky's comments, and then also what types of implementation failures have you seen over the years, and what can we learn from those experiences?
Well, I mean, I would say that some of the failures that we've experienced and our customers have experienced in the past have really been more around, designing automation for the here and now, as opposed to really digging in and understanding what might their future needs be, or choosing to implement a technology that meets whatever the customer's trying to do now, that meets their needs now, but maybe doesn't have the flexibility or the scalability to meet, future needs. And I think there's one thing that our customers, if there's one thing that our customers really, I could categorize them as, they're in a constant state of change. Packaging designs are changing all the time. Consumers want to, purchase products and consume products, more portably, more conveniently, things like that. And so, we're seeing the rate of product change and packaging style changes really increase. We think that's only going to, that's a trend that's going to continue, for the foreseeable future. And from our perspective, selecting the appropriate technologies that are scalable, that will grow with the customers, that have flexibility, to meet their needs, in the future. And I think actually engaging in that dialogue with them. And customers can't always answer that question, but they can give you and give us an idea of, what's likely to come in the future, or how torrid that pace of change may be. And I think that plays a huge role in whether or not an application is going to be, effective over the long term.
Absolutely. So I want to move on and do a segment right now called Misconceptions About Automation, is what we're going to call it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out a statement, and I want you to tell me why this is a misconception, or maybe you agree with what I'm saying. And so let's have a little conversation about misconceptions around automation, because I do think that this is an industry where there are a lot of misconceptions, and there are a lot of things that maybe people assume about the industry that might not be true. And so here's my first misconception about automation, is that automation means people lose their jobs. Richard, let me toss it to you first. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I think there are a number of examples, and those examples are growing, of areas where we've implemented automation that really dramatically increases output, productivity, or results. And yet that new automation ends up actually creating jobs. Now, the issue is it may be new sorts of jobs, and I'll just map back to my aerospace background. It takes, and I won't get the numbers exactly right here, but let's say you put an F-16 in the air. It takes a ground crew of 5 to 8 people to support that pilot who's in that aircraft flying. And when we went to drones, now you're talking about 18 to 24 people, humans, to support that one thing that's in the air. Number one, because it's up there a lot longer, and you've got to have rotating groups of people supporting, but it is creating new jobs. But in many cases, those are new sorts of jobs. So that means that we have this, Alvin Toffler said the illiterate of this century are not people who can't read and write, but who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn fast enough. And we're going to need that level of retraining for some of these new jobs that are emerging. And that's why I'm on the boards of technical community colleges and that sort of thing, is because I think that's the right place to create those new skills we're going to need very rapidly. But it will displace jobs, but it'll also create new ones.
Anybody want to follow up on Richard's comments?
Yeah, I think what Richard said is really pertinent. I mean, I think often automating just takes away the mundane tasks. And McDonald's, for example, when they automated their ordering system, they didn't reduce their workforce. They just put those associates into doing different tasks, like sort of waiting on tables and much more customer-facing things. So one, that's probably a more interesting job for the employee, but it's also a better experience in the actual restaurant itself. So I think there is a great fear among some people, the robots are going to take over, but I wouldn't say that was necessarily true.
All right, so my first misconception has been thoroughly proven wrong.
I think there's two things that I
Yeah, go ahead.
Two things. I think it's imperative that we also keep safety as part of that discussion. Many times you can add automation that eliminates the risk or certainly reduces the hazard associated with jobs that some of us do. and they use robots to go in and search for people in a burning building. They use all kinds of automation in many different ways to keep people out of out of harm's way. So that one is imperative. The other thing is, I'm here in central Kansas, and it's tough sometimes to find just physically the people that it takes to get work done. And so the labor force is just, the quantity of people is smaller than what it once was. So that's where automation comes in to augment the inability to get people.
That's a great point, Steve. That's a fantastic point. I'm going to pause from my misconceptions real quick because we do have a question from the audience. Someone asks, what is considered an acceptable margin of error in the automation industry? Michael, let me kick it to you. What's considered an acceptable margin of error in the automation industry? That might be a tricky question, but I'm curious to see what you guys think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, that margin of error, are we talking about overall, equipment effectiveness? Are we talking about mechanical efficiency? Are we talking about, even the orientation of a product in a case packer? Typically, so I don't really know how to answer that question other than to say that I think that's a great conversation that you should have with whatever OEM you're considering working with about automating a process is to really understand, kind of what the performance of that particular system will be along whatever, whatever criteria you want to measure, and having that conversation about reliability. I mean, for example, from a product handling perspective, we have some hard automation solutions that are non-robotic in nature, that require, products, they're very efficient, they're very cost effective, but they require the product to be oriented, very, very similarly, very uniformly. Where we also use, apply robotic projects that use like AI-driven vision, for example, where you can have much more variability in the types of products, the number of products, the orientation of those products. So it really just depends on the technology, that we're choosing to apply. So I'm not sure if I really can answer the question without knowing kind of more of the specifics of what that individual is really talking about.
Anybody else have any thoughts on an acceptable margin of error in the automation industry? Again, a little bit of a vague question, so difficult to answer for sure.
Well, I mean, I think it's, obviously any decision, as we're discussing here.
I'll add to that. But
Go ahead. All right. So yeah, and it's there are multiple dimensions to any.
No, go ahead.
Any decision to automate. Cost is one, efficiency, accuracy, quality, safety. So it's good that we're bringing all these to bear, because the right sort of balance is going to be different depending on what someone's solving for, and it won't always be the same. But the general expectation is that when we do automate and we replace a human being with a system, that it will be not just marginally better than the human, but dramatically better on any of those axes or all of them. It's ideal when you're able to be dramatically better than humans on all of those axes. You got a big winning solution that turns out to be an annuity generator for you.
Mm-hmm.
We do, my example would be, we do a lot of airport baggage handling systems, and the tolerance to deliver a bag that has not been fully vetted, fully cleared, the tolerance is zero. You cannot do that. You simply can't do that. So that's a metric. We do a lot of work in the automotive industry, and for them, it's about productivity. It's about that customer experience of having that vehicle at the right time with all the right quality criteria that they need for that vehicle. So efficiency and productivity, there's a lot of things there. We in the grain handling industry, it's imperative that when they received 2 different trucks with different commodities in those trucks, it's imperative that the automation system not put 2 different commodities into the same silo, into the same bin. You can't blend those. So I would suggest that the answer to that lies first with what's that particular facility's metric, what drives their business, what's important to them, and then use that to drive the rest of your design criteria. start with that 1 to 3 pieces of data, your important metrics, and then build off of that.
Really fantastic insights, Steve. I think that's really, really well said. So let's get back to common misconceptions about automation. My next misconception is that once I have automation in my facility, everything will be perfect and I will have no more problems. Why am I wrong? Ricky, let me kick it to you first. Why might I be wrong in that particular case?
Well, I mean, I think that, your problems probably are never over, or your challenges. I don't know if problems is quite the word, but your challenges, any progressive organization should constantly be looking at ways of improving. So, you're unlikely to have everything perfect all of the time. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'd say. You've got to constantly look to improve because your competitors are doing that. And to keep ahead, you've got to be doing that.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Once you have automation in your facility, then your life's going to be easy, right?
Well, I would say,
I liken it to icebergs. And you lower, as you find one iceberg, you solve that. All what you're doing is you're lowering the water level to reveal another rock, to reveal another iceberg.
Exactly.
And it's a constant thing. It never stops. And so, yes, you've solved that problem. It's like in an industrial engineering world, they find a bottleneck in some process, they fix that bottleneck, but all that does is then highlight a different bottleneck or the next bottleneck. And it's like a lean manufacturing process. The continuous improvement never ends. And that's what happens in automation. Yes, you solve this problem, but it just highlights others.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that particular one? All right, next common misconception. I can't afford the technology to have automation in my facility. I'm sure this is probably maybe a common objection that you've heard that, hey, I would really like to, but I just can't afford that upfront cost, that capital expenditure, something along those lines. Is this something that any of you have experienced? And if so, what sorts of things, how do you have that conversation? What is that conversation like? Richard, let me toss it to you first. Yep.
Well, again, I think the opportunities are just legion in just about every company today. And those companies who are taking that new lens of automation, again, whether it's human effort or human cognition that they're looking to augment or replace with automation, those companies are thriving today. Those are the ones you want to buy stock in. It's not, I don't think it's a choice anymore. If you've got a company, and we have lots of examples of that's spending 300,000 hours a year performing some human function. Once they realize they can replace it with something that is going to be it's going to be now 20,000 hours of human effort, and there's a cost. Let's say the cost was $100, so it's $30 million that's just built into the P&L. Like someone said, this is the way we've always done things. It's built into the stock price. All of our competitors have the same price, the same cost in their business. The minute you do that one time, not only does it pay that $28 million ROI that year, but it's now an annuity. So any of your competitors who are still doing that are no longer competitive. So you can't afford to ignore it. You just can't. And I worry about anyone who says, no, we're not exploring automation on any of those in any of those areas because they won't be relevant very long. It's an annuity that pays off immediately.
I would add to what Richard said. One of the things we're trying to do, and at Pearson Packaging Systems is coming up with ways to help customers overcome those obstacles. And one of the programs we had, it's been in the software industry for years and years, and some other industries, is introducing the idea of machine as a service. And it's changing our thinking internally. So instead of going through a traditional capital equipment purchasing cycle and trying to sell them a piece of equipment, can we focus on what their desired outcome is, what their desired output is, and actually sell that to them. So instead of spending, I'm just going to say $350,000 on an automated robotic case packer that they pay up front, they can pay us for each successful pick. They can pay us every time we successfully pack a case. They're paying on a per case rate with no down payment, no money up front. And they're really being able to then kind of finance the machine out of the savings that they otherwise wouldn't have generated had they not automated the process. And so that I think it's up to the industry and the OEMs that serve some of these customers to also adopt the approaches that some other industries have taken and not be so, I would say, kind of conservative in their approach. So I think that's going to help people, and I think it dispels that notion that people can't afford automation.
Steve, Ricky, anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to sort of echo both what Richard and Michael have said. I think people can't afford not to automate. Consumers are expecting more and more of retailers. We expect things to be delivered very quickly. We don't want it to go wrong. We would like our, the bots that we find on the internet to actually make sense. And as Richard said, the people who aren't doing this are the people who are going to fall behind and fail. A consumer doesn't notice the automation or the technology behind the process of buying a product until it goes wrong, until something is quick enough, or they're not as quick as somebody else, or their returns aren't as quick as somebody else. So it's something that companies can't afford not to invest in, I think.
Steve, I want to pose.
Ricky, I agree. It's just imperative that.
Go ahead. No.
Go ahead. It's just you take all these other factors into account. The ROI becomes a very easy number to justify, to come up with. I will also say Michael's concept of putting the automation with skin in the game, that is being paid back for success. There's a lot of that's a fairly new model that I see more and more, and it can be a win-win deal. It can be win on the operation side. It can also be a win-win for the OEM side.
Yeah, that's a particularly fascinating example, and I'm glad Michael shared that, because that was pretty interesting to me. Steve, I want to pose this next one to you first, and that's the idea that I don't have the necessary expertise or knowledge of the technology to be able to bring automation into a facility. Do you ever hear that from people? And if so, what do you say to that common misconception that I just don't have the expertise necessary to bring this into a facility that I manage?
Well, I think it's not only that, it's that what we're seeing is that more and more people are eliminating the people that they had with that support. And they're relying more and more on external support to provide that technical expertise. So there's challenges in that also at the same time. And in particular, cybersecurity is the fear there that, wait a minute, I'm going to let somebody from outside of my company have some impact or some connection into my system. And what could that be? How much harm could come from that? Well, the other side of that coin is how much good could come from it. Because the reality is you can quickly get an expert on the other end of the line and have this thing back up and running and at least understand what the problem is quickly, versus somebody who is a jack of all trades and master of none. They're really good at a lot of things, but they can't fix everything in your facility. So there are ways to securely allow remote access into your equipment, into your systems. There's absolutely ways to do that. Make that part of the contract, make that part of the solution, a specific line item that you address, no different than production rates or quality or a cost. One of the deliverables needs to be, how do we make that connection so we can get that remote support in a secure way?
Michael, it seems like you especially agreed with something Steve said there. Was there anything that stood out to you that you wanted to follow up on?
Well, I just think Steve's point about allowing remote access, I think there are a lot of fears that customers had, about people kind of, being able to remotely monitor, remotely access, their installations. And I think, if there's something that we've noticed that's come out of the pandemic is that some of these customers have shut down their facilities to outsiders, and they've been forced to adopt this technology. And I think they've found a lot of the benefits that Steve's talking about, that they can very, very cost effectively, very, very quickly get a subject matter expert connected to that machine, diagnose the problem, and in many cases, without having an individual actually ever set foot in their plant, resolve the problem, get them up and running, as long as they're willing to, allow that level of access. And so that's something that I'm really hopeful that we're not going to return to kind of the practices, the pre-pandemic practices, that this is something that's really going to stick, that this is going to be a technology that people continue to rely on and adopt at a faster rate, because I think it solves a lot of problems, in terms of maintaining existing discrete machine centers or even complete end-of-line systems.
Michael brought up a great point there, and Ricky and Richard, I'm curious about your opinion on this. He brought up an idea of something that has been an innovation primarily due to the pandemic, or maybe put more into practice because of the pandemic and using kind of a remote way to adjust the system, and then it's sticking around and becoming a permanent fixture in the future. What other things have you seen during this time as a result of the pandemic, do you think become permanent fixtures afterwards because they've largely improved processes and made things more efficient?
I think, I can't remember who said this. So I've heard Rahm Emanuel, I've heard Winston Churchill. Someone said, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? and there is opportunity. There's an opportunity here to do some Schumpeter level creative destruction, really get down to the first principles, understanding of like, what is it we're trying to accomplish and why? And let's not just keep duct taping onto it what we did before, whether it's education or healthcare or manufacturing or transportation or energy, and instead look at, what could we do better and why are we using human skills or human effort in these areas when we can automate them? Why are people driving long distances to huddle together in office buildings when it's sometimes not necessary or not necessary as often? So it is providing a really good lens on all of those questions. And I do hope that we do see some permanent change in some of these areas for a variety of reasons. And, after 9/11, many of us thought that we would all be doing more of this remote presentation, and no one's going to want to get on an airplane again. But that lasted about 18 months, and then we were right back at it. So we'll see what happens this time.
I think Richard's made some good points there. We sort of found a lot with our customers. They want a bit of the best of both worlds, really. I mean, I think they want things delivered, they want groceries delivered, they want everything else they can order on the internet delivered quickly and efficiently. But also, the pandemic's also sort of brought around more of a sort of a human level. Particularly here in Australia, there's very much a big push for local. People have been working at home. So whereas the city centres have been quiet and unfortunately, sadly, the cafes and restaurants have suffered enormously, local areas, they've had, massive increase in business. And people, because they've been at home, because they've been, not been locked down or not able to socialise, people are starting to crave again human touch. So I think we kind of want this balance between, what we can get automatically, but also to actually have some community, a sense of community and socialization. And I think, more and more as countries come out, their vaccines programs increase and they come out of these sort of lockdowns. We're not currently in a lockdown in Australia. People will want to start go, to congregate together and actually have that human sort of aspect to it as well. And it'll be interesting to see how quickly people want to start traveling again. As Richard said, it's I think we quickly forget things.
Well, Ricky has a lovely Australian sunrise over her shoulder right
I
there.
do.
So I think it's making everyone just a little bit envious, no matter where you are in the world, to see that happening over her shoulder. We're going to announce the winner of a Nest home thermostat from Google just after this final question. So if you're sticking around for that, stick around just a little bit longer. We'll announce the winner here in just a few minutes. But y'all, I want to wrap up today just by talking about the future of automation and what that looks like into the future and what kinds of innovations you see coming down the pipeline. And so let me toss out this question first. Michael, let me hit you up first. Just what sorts of innovations, what do you think the future of automation looks like? And what are you looking forward to specifically at Pearson Packaging Systems?
Well, I personally think that, when we talk about, replacing, menial tasks with automation, people really underestimate how flexible human beings are and how adaptable they are, especially in an uncertain environment, like in a packaging environment. And so I think, one of the things we're really focused on is the implementation of like AI-driven vision that allows robotic systems to function much more flexibly in real time than, pre-programmed systems, for example. It's leveraging that kind of technology that really, allows, some applications that previously weren't very easily automated to be much more easily automated. And so I think the continued push into robotics, I think AI-driven vision is going to be a huge part of what we're focused on moving forward.
Richard, what about you? Future of automation, what does it look like?
Well, I think the first thing to understand and really wrap your head around for all of you listening is that anything that can be automated will be. Mm-hmm. And, again, we used to think, well, that's just tasks like manufacturing and that sort of thing. But now increasingly, and that's where my company spends a lot of time, is in the cognitive space, things like replacing lawyers. And hopefully we'll find something for those poor folks to do. But we believe, accounting, legal, all of these activities we thought were purely in the human domain are being automated now to great effect and with great efficiency. So prepare for that future. And it doesn't mean, again, that all of us will be unemployed. We've already been able, during the Industrial Revolution, we went from, in 1800 in the United States, 90% of everybody was involved in agriculture. In 1900, it was 40. Today, it's 2. So we found stuff for people to do. And we'll do that with the kinds of automation we're creating as well. It's just you've got to stay frosty, be adaptive, and be prepared to move into new fields as they emerge, because they will.
Steve, future of automation, what do you think? All right, we'll move on. Ricky, what do you think the future of automation looks like, and how does it relate to you?
Absolutely. And what you I've written down a couple of notes here. Data. But the trick is,
well, I'm not too sure what the future of automation looks like, really. I think I'd leave this up to these clever guys here who kind of invent it all or develop it all. I mean, my hope is that it just makes our lives easier, and I think it probably will, and free us up from mundane and tedious things, and just to have better and easier lives, I guess.
I think that's a great place to leave things today. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this roundtable. To my guests, Richard, Steve, Michael, and Ricky, thank you all so much for being a part of this one. And we need to announce our winner for a Google Nest thermostat. Our winner today is Rhonda Baker from Casa Companies. Rhonda Baker, make sure to get in touch with us. Let us know how you want to get that delivered. Obviously, automation, Nest, automated thermostat, it goes hand in hand. I think it's clever. But anyways, congratulations to Rhonda Baker. Thank you so much for watching along with us today. And thank you so much to my fantastic panel of guests. Thank you all very much for joining me here on our Automation Industry Roundtable.
Thank you,
Tyler. Appreciate everybody.
And everyone, thank you once again for watching along with us. We'll be back soon with another exciting edition of the Automation Industry Roundtable, where we'll dive into more high-level topics in the world of automation. But of course, we do an industry roundtable every Monday, so if you are involved in other industries, we do retail, we do quick service restaurants, we do education technology. So no matter what you're interested in, what area of focus that you have, we have an industry roundtable for you. So stay tuned. We always have them at 1 p.m. Central Time. That's noon, 2 o'clock Eastern, noon Mountain, and of course 11 a.m. Pacific Time. So make sure to stay tuned for more of those, and of course we'll be back soon with more great content from MarketScale. But until then, I've been your host today, Tyler Kern. Thanks for watching.